Senator Dianne Feinstein reportedly expressed confusion last year over Vice President Kamala Harris presiding over the Senate. According to a New York Times report, Feinstein asked, "What is she doing here?" when she saw Harris presiding over the chamber in the tie-breaking vote last year, according to someone who witnessed the occurrence. The Times writes that Feinstein has at times expressed confusion about how the basics of the Senate functions as well.
The 89-year-old senator also reportedly relies heavily on staff to function and is surrounded by aides at all times who, quote, tell her how and when to vote, explain what's going on when she's confused, and shield her from the press, according to the Times. I have also found myself wondering, what is Kamala Harris doing here? So maybe that's not so dispositive. But
relatable, actually.
But what else can we say at this point? She is so clearly beyond the ability to do this job. It's elder abuse. She is disoriented frequently. People have spoke her on her staff. People in conversation with her. She looks horrible. She's in bad physical shape as well. I mean, she should not have run for re-election. They should have exited her at a time, maybe a less politically perilous time or something. If she did run for re-election, It's just not, it's so insane that she's still being propped up.
What's interesting about this is that some folks say, okay, fine. Obviously, in retrospect, she shouldn't have run again. People are going to say, well, at the time, we were telling you she shouldn't have run again. But okay, mulligans aside, now what are you going to do? We got her back in there. She voted the way that she was supposed to vote. There's some difficulty about replacing her. There's the awkwardness of replacing her. Why are we still talking about this? I do think that a lot of us would like to see in this moment a more fulsome conversation about the broader problems with the gerontocracy that's happening in the Democratic Party. But the few Democrats who've been willing to come forward and say it's a problem that we don't make room for up-and-comers in the party, that up-and-comers in the party are openly antagonized the way that Nancy Pelosi openly antagonized the squad and had to get them in line to make sure that they weren't a quote-unquote problem for her. The way that Nancy Pelosi held on to leadership for so long, seemingly only kind of reluctantly and at the 11th hour after 30-plus years in Congress, handing over the reins to Hakeem Jeffries, is part of a bigger issue. And those Democrats who have come forward to criticize that and to criticize Joe Biden being put forward as the party's choice back in 2020, like Julian Castro, have themselves been the subject of a lot of criticism and push out as well. And so, it does seem to me to be the case that even if there is some reckoning or some public acknowledgement at this time that what has happened with Dianne Feinstein is a mistake, it seems like a systemic problem that the Democrats have no interest in actually taking on.
And the immediate pivot to identity politics to protect her in that position, they hate powerful women, something like that. Actually, I was watching over the weekend cable news. I can't remember if it was MSNBC or CNN. Representative Katie Porter was being interviewed about the situation, and kind of the premise of the interview was, if Dianne Feinstein does resign, Katie Porter is interested. She's going to run for the seat anyway. But the framing was like, but Gavin Newsom has pledged in the event that happens that he would pick a black woman. So are you? You would, if you wanted that spot, it's like you're saying that he should break his promise to black women everywhere. It was like the most identity politics framing of this I could possibly imagine, and it was so. And I don't share Katie Porter's politics whatsoever. She's not necessarily my favorite candidate. We've actually done some reporting on how she treats her staff earlier, so I wouldn't say she's exactly endeared herself to me. But I felt bad for her trying to, she wants to be the figure. It should be substantively about her policy views and maybe how she treats her staff. Those things, not whether she's a black woman. And she was being forced into that to almost say that, she'd be taking a spot from black women have it reserved because Gavin Newsom made that problem. It was so backward the whole way it was being framed.
I wish Joe Biden has done this, Gavin Newsom has done this. Notably, it's these white guys who are using the idea of having the power to appoint a black woman to gain some kind of clout. At least they perceive it to be getting some kind of clout from the Black community. But it does feel like a move that is exploitative in and of itself, because you put whoever the nominee is in the position of having to defend the merit of their being chosen. Biden did this with Kamala Harris, who I think has a lot of legitimate criticisms made about her. He also did this with Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is eminently qualified to be on the Supreme Court, but who also now has to fend off accusations that she was picked solely because of her race. And so it seems to me to be a move that ultimately hurts Black people. If you have a Black candidate in mind, or you think the best candidate for the job is a Black person, just say that you want that candidate. But to frame it the way these white men keep framing it, it seems to be only inuring to their benefit to the extent that it is beneficial at all, and really comes with a significant backlash against both the Black women themselves and people like Katie Porter, who, I agree with you, should be having a conversation about who is best for the seat on the basis of how they can deliver for their constituents, including, by the way, Black constituents. I would like to see a lot more focus on the needs of various constituent groups, whatever they may be, including their material needs as opposed to their exclusively racial needs, and instead of focusing so solely on the demographics of the person in the spot, because so often we have seen members of various minority groups undermining the interest or betraying the interest of the people that they were elected to represent, because power corrupts, and the issue isn't necessarily having Black faces in high places, but some of these structural problems that lead to the corruption in cities that for now half a century have been largely Black-led without the benefits accruing to the Black populations there.
Right. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Obviously, no indication that she's resigning necessarily anytime soon. Despite all of this constant stream of reporting on how incapable she is of doing the job, how it is materially holding up the business of judicial appointments, a critically important task for the administration while they're in power, right? They have the Senate. They can do this.
Yeah. So the Washington Post did a report on this. Apparently, Democrats in the state of California are very divided about what to do about the Feinstein situation. They write, in more than 24 interviews, Democratic delegates gathered in Los Angeles were deeply divided about whether Feinstein should stay in her role or step down. Many said they fear that congressional Republicans could block a replacement for her on the Judiciary Committee if she left the Senate before the end of her term. Others expressed uncertainty about whom Governor Newsom would appoint to replace her. That was your point about the Black women. So one, it would be the interim replacement, but it would have whoever he replaced her with would have the power of incumbency and the advantage in the subsequent election. So that is a legitimate concern. But there's also this concern that even though there's no issue with it being a Democrat in the seat, whether or not she could get the same committee appointments is more of a toss-up, and to the extent that there is more of a legislative agenda that needs to get passed before the end of Joe Biden's term, whether or not it's worth the gamble of just keeping the old dog in the race as it is.
Yeah, but she is not in good shape. That is so evident. I know we've talked about it almost to death at this point, but it's just so apparent. And, there's also your Pennsylvania senator, same issues, John Fetterman.
Although Ken Klippenstein made this interesting point recently on Twitter. He said that a significant difference between the two is that people recover from strokes. People don't recover from dementia, right? Senility, which is being alleged here. So a relatively young man who has a health crisis that is affecting his speech, perhaps not his cognition. There's been nothing near the kind of claim that's being made about Dianne Feinstein in terms of John Fetterman's cognition. And also he's in a position where he can improve over time. This Feinstein situation is only going to get worse. Yeah, only going to get worse until she does exit that seat at some point. One way or another, yeah. All right, tomorrow on Rising, we'll be back digging into Briahna's most favoritist topics and my least favorite, modern monetary theory and student debt. Oh, I guess we're committed to that. I was going to strike that from the list while you weren't looking, but thanks a lot, writers. Thank you to all the writers. All of the writers across the United States of America, including those on strike. This is why we love you. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. For those of you who like to listen while you're on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later. Take care.